All right, it's time for the last three chapters of Luke. So here we go. Luke 22, verse 1. Now, the feast of unleavened bread drew near, which is called Passover. And the chief priests and the scribes sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people. Then Satan entered Judas, surnamed Iscariot, who was numbered among the 12. So he went his way and conferred with the chief priests and captains how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and agreed to give him money. So he promised and sought opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of the multitude. Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. And he sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare the Passover for us, that we may eat." So they said to him, "Where do you want us to prepare?" And he said to them, "Behold, when you have entered the city, a man will meet you, carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house which he enters. Then you shall say to the master of the house, 'The teacher says to you, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' Then he will show you a large furnished upper room. There make ready." So they went and found it just as he had said to them, and they prepared the Passover. Okay, so just to go over that, of course, it was during those certain feast days that unleavened bread actually went on for a week. And Passover was a one-day feast. And of course, this all happened at the same time because he was fulfilling all these feasts. Then the resurrection happens on another feast, the day of first fruits. So it's all in fulfillment of Bible prophecy, and all these things are types and foreshadowings of what Jesus would do. So just to recap that, and then here, I was mentioning this earlier, like the way these things all fell into place with the donkey at the triumphal entry, and now the upper room for the Last Supper, and they also used it at Pentecost. The way these things worked out sounds like there was another arrangement in place. Maybe this guy, like the other one, I mentioned it too, but maybe this guy prayed and said, if this is the one, then I am offering this room for that occasion, for the Passover, for them. And then if that's the case, then let one of his disciples come and ask for it. That would be like a confirmation, the way those things work, because nobody would have known if he had prayed that, right, except God. So it's like a confirmation. Yes, this is the Messiah and all that. But it could also be that he talked to them and offered it, and they said, yeah, he knew and said, yes, later I'll send my disciple and, arrange that and make ready. So that could be, but it's funny how these things always fall into place. And anyway, so I think it was the praying. I think that's what it was. And then it was like a surprise. He shows up and, okay, so where's the room? Oh, he did know, that kind of thing. But anyway, if this was a movie, that's how I would want it to go. Okay, moving on. So 14. When the hour had come, he sat down, and the 12 apostles with him. Then he said to them, "With fervent desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say to you, I will no longer eat of it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God." Then he took the cup and gave thanks and said, "Take this and divide it among yourselves, for I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes." And he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Okay, so it's symbolic, it's remembrance. Likewise, he also took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. But behold, the hand of my betrayer is with me on the table, and truly the Son of Man goes as it has been determined. But woe to that man by whom he is betrayed." Then they began to question among themselves which of them it was who would do this thing. Okay, and then here again, so it was mentioned earlier where he said that, the law and the prophets were up until that time, until John, and then he institutes the new covenant, and now we're under the new covenant, not the old covenant, not everything that's entailed in the old covenant, and we're under the new covenant. And that's what there's so many people who don't understand. And the word for that is Judaizers, but it fits a lot of categories. The biggest one these days would be the Hebrew Roots movement. Then you have the SDA called, all these groups that want to put you back under the law, So we're under a new covenant now. That's why everything changed, okay? That's why it had to happen that way, the way that it all happened, what he talked about before this. All those things, one stone not upon another, all those things. It had to be that way for this. So anyway, so yeah, we're under it's a new time, the church age. Okay, so now there was also a dispute among them as to which of them should be considered the greatest. And he said to them, "The kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those who exercise authority over them are called benefactors. But not so among you. On the contrary, he who is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he who governs as he who serves. For who is greater, he who sits at the table or he who serves? Is it not he who sits at the table? Yet I am among you as the one who serves. But you are those who have continued with me in my trials, and I bestow upon you a kingdom, just as my Father bestowed one upon me, that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel." Okay, so to go back to this where it says, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those who exercise authority over them are called benefactors. That sheds a lot of light on the situation, doesn't it? They're the ones benefiting mostly, right? I mean, I'm not saying in a society the citizens don't benefit at all, but depending on the situation, a lot of these rulers benefit quite a bit. So that's the way of the world, and it's not like that in the kingdom. So and that's exactly what he says next, but just it inverts the whole thing. And I think of these churches where, they model the structure of the world in that way, not the structure of the kingdom. There's one benefactor on top of the stage, under the spotlight, and, that's it. And they're the ones benefiting. Now, I keep thinking about this, and I mean, I know, like, if you're a new Christian, of course, there are many things we don't know when we're new. And there are things that are different than, like, when you're a new Christian, if you find, I'm not saying they're all bad, the whole thing's bad, I'm not saying that, but there are places where you can grow and benefit yourself, and teaching is good. It's just hard to find them. And everything, at least it's pretty good the way it should be. Maybe not perfect or ideal, but good. But there's so few and far between of those. Most of them, they're just these big empires. And there's one ruler, right? And they really do set up that structure. Everybody else is, I mean, I've heard some stories where these churches are set up like they literally enslave the people, and put them under all these obligations. I mean, see, that just blows my mind that anybody would think they're obligated to do these things. I don't know, but they're not. But I don't know how anybody can fall for that. I don't know, but they do. But even if it isn't a real, let's say it's not a good one, but it's not real bad, but these places where, I don't know, I mean, I have visited some of these just for investigating the situation, and that's what you see. It's just this big auditorium style setup, and the one guy on the platform talking in the spotlight for, well, 45 minutes on average. And aside from the worship songs, which has turned into more of a concert type of performance that resembles a rock concert many times more than anything else, and the way they're dressed up there, oh, I don't know. It's the same thing. It's just like the world. Anyway, and tell me this. Why do they always have to have that expression, like the women especially? Okay, I'm on a roll here. Here we go. So they will literally hold this microphone and they have this expression on their face, like either it's really good or it's really bad. Like, this lady's in pain, okay? She is having a baby. It's that bad. It's just this expression, like, oh, there's so much passion going on in my heart right now. And their whole face is all like contorted by this, and they're screaming it out like, oh boy, they're just feeling it. And I mean, to me, it looks like it's all just a big show. I mean, trust me, you can feel all this and not have to make these expressions. It looks like a show. It is a show. I said that many times before, but anyway. But okay, that's the exception. Otherwise, it's the one guy the whole time. Everybody else is sitting there listening to him go on and on. And, I know that in the world there are things where, okay, there's a lecture hall, a seminar, a conference, and yeah, a person has to talk and people would listen, and hopefully it's that interesting that they would really not be falling asleep. Okay, but this is not the setup for church. This is not what God had in mind, okay? And the verse that explains what he did have in mind is 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 26. Okay, I say it all the time, but that's the perfect picture right there. And there are others that are similar, but that says it. Okay, this is the total opposite. And this one guy talk, and everybody else is just sitting there, maybe gazing up at him with starstruck eyes for this whole time, as if it's that interesting. And if it really would be, okay, but most of the time it's not. It's not even Bible. It's just a lot of fluff, a lot of feel-good fluff, and then they talk about themselves, and they talk about their lives, and they show pictures of their family, like it's like, oh, I'm the big celebrity. It's all about me and my family, and me, myself, and I. And can you imagine if how backwards this is? I heard that there's even a statistic. I forgot if it was the Barna Group that does these things. That's an interesting thing too. But they do surveys and statistics on church information, data about churches. The Barna Group, BARNA. Anyway, I think it was them, but somebody did this and found out that it was a high percentage of people that gravitate to the position of pastor, and it's narcissists. It was, I don't know if it was 70% or higher, but a large number, a huge percentage of narcissists gravitate to that position because they get the spotlight. Oh, it's all about me, and other similar positions like that as well. I've noticed, a lot of principals in schools are like that too. I've seen that, long story, but yeah. Um, you would think politicians, but there are certain roles like this that attract them. They just, like a magnet, they gravitate to that. And this was one of the roles. When this guy is up there in the spotlight talking about many times about himself, and he's getting money, okay, he's getting help, all this stuff. He has all these people under him, and they're narcissists. I mean, this is not the way it's supposed to be. Can you imagine if a person in the congregation said, oh yeah, I got some family pictures too. I'm sure you all want to see those too. Do you mind if I come up and show them now to the congregation and yourself as well? Can you imagine the look on his face? He'd be aghast. His jaw would drop like, what did you just say? Yeah, try to do the same thing they do, and that's the reaction you'll get. Because it's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be equal, and it's not. They set up this elitism, this hierarchical structure with narcissists at the pinnacle. That's why it's the way it is. And everybody's just starstruck by this supposed celebrity. I don't care who they are. I don't care what they teach. That's just wrong. The structure is wrong. And then when it's over, it's almost like the bell rings and you're dismissed, right, at school. And then where is the fellowship? They all bolt out the door like the building's on fire. Okay, that is not church. It might say church in the front of a building, but that is not church. Okay, church is what it says in there in 1 Corinthians 14, verse 26. Okay, it's a group that knows each other intimately. They fellowship. So, I mean, I would picture a home fellowship where they're sitting, one of those sectional sofas where they're sitting around in a circle facing each other. Nobody is the leader like in that way, okay? And they're all fellowshipping. They care about one another. They're interacting, they're engaging. And like that word, they're one anothering, because that comes up all the time in the New Testament for the church. Love one another, help one another, admonish one another. All those things. Well, how is that there if they have no opportunity? They're all separated into their little invisible cubicle bubbles. It's the divide and conquer strategy, So there's no, because they're worried that they'll smarten up and they'll make their own group. So they want to keep them separated. I know, I've seen this. But anyway, so, they're supposed to be engaging and practicing all these things, including the spiritual gifts, They're all supposed to have something to share. It's learning from the Bible. It is worship, which involves singing, worshiping the Lord, despite what some people might want to have you think. And I've heard this stuff, I know. It's praying, it's communion, it's a lot of things. spiritual gifts being exercised happens to be one of them. Fellowship happens to be one of them. Admonishing one another, helping one another in any way, charity-wise or otherwise. That's the model. And when you read it, it says, each of you has something to contribute, like to share every time you meet. Okay, that is church. That's the definition of church according to the Word of God. Not some man in the spotlight who'll never tell you this. They won't, So, that's it. But they got it all wrong. And this is how it needs to be, and that's it. So anyway, and I do this. This is the only help I can give out, honestly. Like, I don't have a group, so this is all I can do. But I'm just hoping it'll help someone. At least it's the truth, Anyway, it'll wake people up, that kind of thing. So anyway, so they won't be exploited by these narcissists that are out there everywhere. So, I'm not saying everyone, but I've seen a lot of them in my research time. So anyway, another thing before I move on, that's that. But you know how you hear, this is another thing I got to do a video on probably, when they say things like in a church setting, maybe someone's in sin, and then they'll excuse it with this, oh, well, that's between them and God. Well, only God knows their heart. You've probably heard it too. All right. No, if like, it's not a suspicion, but somebody's in sin. Let's say they're committing adultery and they're, something like that. It needs to be addressed within the church. It's not between them and God, It is, but it's more than that. It's among the church as well. Church discipline is another thing that needs to happen, and it says that 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 12 to 13, you need to deal with the sinning brother and, administer discipline. And there's a procedure for that, and then hopefully they can be restored, but it needs to be addressed, and they don't want to do that either, and that's just their, sugar-coated cop-out of, well, it's between them and the Lord. No. Among the church, it's between the church and them and the Lord. So that's what he wants them to do. That's what he would have them do, and his word says it. So, but they want to slink out of everything. And that's why, this is another thing that's supposed to happen, and it doesn't, and you know what, I was thinking this too, like, so, okay, that's another item that, they set the structure up that way so they don't have to deal with this stuff. They don't have to be the church actively the way the Bible says. They can take it the easy road. They don't have to, know what's going on in your life and help you and pray for you and maybe exercise discipline or admonish someone. Anything. They don't have to do it, and they, if their spiritual gifts being exercised, and there needs to be some discernment, and it's their job, if they're a leader, to do that kind of thing. But, it gets sticky, right? And they worry about things, and these people have a lot of money and they're going to get offended and they'll leave if I say something. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So they remove themselves on a platform and have everybody else way down there, and they don't have to deal with it. They have it easy, they don't have to get involved in these things. And that's how they set it up on purpose. They know what the Bible says, many of them at least, and they just don't, they're too lazy. They don't want to have the responsibility of doing that. How can they be considered a leader? And then they want to get money on top of it for this. And all they're doing is standing there talking. They're not really even, if they are teaching anything good at all is a question, but that's all they're doing, if that. Many times it's not even good, but that's all they're doing. They're not being a shepherd. They're not leading anyone, if they are, it's probably in the wrong direction, but this is what they do by design. They calculate these things and they do these things, and that's why there's that in all these churches. There's that where the pastor doesn't even know your name. He doesn't know who you are. He doesn't know anything about you. And the bigger the church, the easier that is for him to do. Oh, you need help. Oh, well, I don't know you from Adam. How long have you been coming here? Oh, 3 years? Well, I wouldn't know that. I don't, they don't see you. They don't know you. You're an anonymous face in the crowd. They don't know. You could have been coming there a year, a day, or 10 years, and they wouldn't know the difference. And they like it so because it gives them their excuse. Well, how do I know? Maybe you just showed up yesterday and now you want help from me. Well, I'm sorry, And that's why they don't have, now, I don't believe in membership, in a way of like, you're a member, so now you're special. But if we're saved, we are a member of his church. If we're not, we're not. Whatever else doesn't matter. But it's good to have a roster of some kind of directory. And I used to see that in smaller churches a long time ago. They could contact each other, see, but now they don't want that. Why divide and conquer? They don't want you to know how to contact each other. They want to keep you separated. Anyway, most of them, many of them have those home groups now. Some do, but many don't. But anyway, so, they don't want to know who you are because then they're accountable to help you. They know how long you've been on that list. They know that they're responsible to help you. But if there's no list, there's no record. Who knows? You could have shown up yesterday or today. Nobody knows. You're just anonymous, right? It's all set up by design. These big places, it's a joke. There's nothing good going on. If you're lucky in a small church, you'll find something. But home fellowships really are the way to go. Okay, well, that was a long one and it just rolled out, so I went with it. All right. So I read this. Oh yeah, and then I read this benefactor. That's what got me going. Okay, the serving and getting benefits and all that, hierarchies. All right. Now he set the example. We're supposed to follow that, not the world. Okay, so there's no excuse, none. Okay. Now here he says this, you've continued with me, and see, this is how, another way we know the kingdom is still coming. This isn't just talk or some other false teaching that floats around out there now. There is a kingdom coming, okay? It isn't here yet. Only he can bring it, and that's with his return. And then he sets up the kingdom, and that's the millennial reign. And then he says, so that you'll sit at my table, like eat and drink at that, probably the wedding feast, at the onset of the kingdom, and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So this was what they would get later. They get 12 thrones that are different, and they'll be judging the 12 tribes of Israel. There's another little nugget that people pass by quickly. See, this is what's going to be happening during the millennium, all right? There'll be a population, and this is going to be the setup of how that will be run. And, anyway, that I'll talk about it more later. All right, now, all right, and, okay, like, the 144,000, right? So it goes from that, basically, but there are more details that would come up later. It takes too long. 31. And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed, Satan has asked for you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. Okay, here we go. he knew what would happen, of course, with Peter and the denial, And then here, this was what's going on behind the scenes. The devil, was trying to he's going to tempt him in this way. The flesh was weak and he caved, okay, with the denial thing, the 3 times, when the rooster crowed. So this is it. So, and he wants, so he could be sifted like wheat. So this is what goes on in every situation of persecution of Christians in the world, okay? So it's something to be very vigilant about and on guard. Not just take it for granted, anybody can make the same mistake. And we need to be on guard that we don't do that. Okay. But I have prayed for you, see, that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. So he knew he would return and be restored, and that is described in John chapter 21, that whole process. But anyway, he does do this, he does return and he does get restored, but it was necessary that he needed to be, to return. So he says, when you have returned to me. So you can't just deny and move along the way about your daily life. That makes all the difference right there. Once that happens, you need to be restored. You need to return to him and be restored, if that has happened. But it's not just, oh, he'll forgive me, that's how serious this is, and that's how trivial they make it in the church culture today. So yeah. Okay, so when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. So then he has a job for him to do at that point, and he does it. So everything turned out fine, but don't take it for granted, Some people didn't even know. I had conversations with people, they didn't even know Peter needed to be restored after that. I've heard pastors saying things like, oh, Judas would have been all right if he would have just, repented. There's a point of going too far beyond the point of no return. And many times Jesus says, like, woe to that man. It would have been better for him never to be born, and that kind of thing. Because his heart was that hard. He just loved the money, and that was it. So it was just, he was too far out there, and that's it. So, and they don't get it. And then I've heard pastors when I was young saying things like, oh, like it doesn't matter how far off they are, and they can all get saved. And I don't know, but they paint this rosy picture, like anything goes, and even the music now, like, oh, like you can never run too far than to outrun the love of God. Like, just don't worry, it's all just one big party, and then you'll be all right at the end because of God's love. These are lies. They are, that's not the message the Bible teaches. So but there are these messages out there, like, Jesus said some people are close to the kingdom and some people are far from the kingdom. There was a difference, and the same thing with sin. They make it sound like all sin is on an equal level, but that's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches there are levels of sin. Some are worse than others. It's not like a white lie is at the same level as murder, This gives people the idea, oh, well, I told a white lie, so I might as well go off and do all these things now too, if they're prone to do that way. But it's all lies. These are lies. Lies you hear in the church from pastors. So anyway, but they want to whitewash everything. Like, oh, it's okay, that person, oh, they are probably fine, like, they're so far out there, but there's no such thing as too far out there. They can always, and I don't know where the line is drawn. I don't, of course, but they just give too much leeway there. There's too much of any serial killer can just on his deathbed, say the sinner's prayer and be propelled into heaven. And there's something off about that, So okay. All right. So, like, there is something called an unforgivable sin, and there are levels, and you don't want to be in danger and go that far out there. And yeah, like reprobate, it's called reprobate. They get too far out there, and they're just out of the reach of grace. Their hearts are too hard to repent anymore and feel conviction, feel guilt, and know the need to be saved. They're just too far out there. So there is a danger with those things, and they may paint a picture like it's all A-OK, and it's not. So, all right, 32 or 33. But he said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. Then he said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny 3 times that you know me. All right, and that's exactly what happened. Okay, so 35. And he said to them, when I sent you without money bag, knapsack, and sandals, did you lack anything? So they said, nothing. Then he said to them, but now see, it changes. Now it's a different set of instructions. But now he who has a money bag, let him take it, and likewise a knapsack. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. So this is where they say, like self-defense is okay. So anyway, 37, for I say to you that this which is written must still be accomplished in me. And he was numbered with the transgressors. For the things concerning me have an end, meaning that they're all going to be fulfilled. Now this is down here. Isaiah 53 verse 12 is that one, and that's what happened on with the picture you see all the time with 3 crosses, one in the middle with him and 2 sinners, one on each side. Okay, so he said, look, Lord, look, here are 2 swords. And he said to them, it is enough. And it almost feels like he sees they didn't get it, and okay, I don't know, but I kind of sense that. All right, now, moving along. Coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives as he was accustomed, and his disciples also followed him. When he came to the place, he said to them, pray that you may not enter into temptation. See, this is a serious instruction, all right? It's in that Lord's Prayer, and people take it for granted, like, either they won't fall into temptation, or if they do, they'll be okay no matter what anyway. It's that kind of, everything is a no matter what, no matter how far, no matter how bad, no matter how much they fall into temptation, how much they've sinned, how much they've done these things, and they think it'll all be okay no matter what, but that's not what it teaches. Okay, so, and he was withdrawn from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. and being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Okay, now there is a medical condition where this happens when you really are in great distress, like really great distress. This happens. So I forgot what it's called. You would have to look it up and see. 45. When he rose up from prayer and had come to his disciples, he found them sleeping from sorrow. Then he said to them, "Why do you sleep? Rise and pray, lest you enter into temptation." So there's that again with, entering the danger of entering into temptation. And while he was still speaking, behold, a multitude, and he who was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near to Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" When those around him saw what was going to happen, they said to him, "Lord, shall we strike with the sword?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus answered and said, "Permit even this." And he touched his ear and healed him. Okay, that's what I kept saying in the other Gospels, that this is what happens. Jesus actually heals the man's ear, heals him from this. And it's a perfect picture of what he says: love your enemies. They were coming out against him with clubs and swords. Then this happens, and he heals him, So it's love your enemies in action right there. And also, this wasn't supposed to be a battle. This was supposed to happen a certain way to fulfill prophecy. So what would the point be anyway, right? All right. So, but this is a beautiful detail that Luke includes, and I've heard that he's the one who includes this because Luke was a physician and he was into this stuff. But okay. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, captains of the temple, and the elders who had come to him, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you daily in the temple, you did not try to seize me, but this is your hour and the power of darkness." Okay, so you know how many times they had tried, and he said his time had not yet come, right? That's why they couldn't get him. He was protected. But now the time had come. Prophecy was going to be fulfilled, so now it's allowed to happen. So the chief priests were there, the captains of the temple, and the elders. That's who Judas betrayed him into the hands of, like it said. All right. Having arrested him, they led him and brought him into the high priest's house. But Peter followed at a distance. Now, when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. And a certain servant girl, seeing him as he sat by the fire, looked intently at him and said, "This man was also with him." But he denied him, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." So here's number one. And after a little while, another saw him and said, "You also are one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." That's number two. Then, after about an hour had passed, another confidently affirmed, saying, "Surely this fellow also was with him, for he is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are saying." That's number three. Immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So Peter went out and wept bitterly. Okay, now the men who held Jesus mocked him and beat him. And having blindfolded him, they struck him on the face and asked him, saying, Prophesy, who is the one who struck you? And many other things they blasphemously spoke against him. As soon as it was day, so this went on all night, okay? As soon as it was day, the elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, came together and led him into their council, saying, If you are the Christ, tell us. And it's like he's been telling them this all along. How many times do you need to hear it, right? But he said to them, If I tell you, you will by no means believe. And if I also ask you, you will by no means answer me or let me go. Right? So, in other words, like, they won't answer his question. Why does he need to answer their question? Well, he doesn't. That's it. Hereafter, the Son of Man will sit on the right hand of the power of God. Then they all said, Are you then the Son of God? He said to them, You rightly say that I am. And they said, What further testimony do we need? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth. Okay, so it's at 46, so I'm going to stop the video and start it again in a minute.